It's Tim Albright with AVNation with an AVNation special celebrating International Women's Day the entire month of March. And with me today is my good buddy, Erica Carroll, who is now with Mersive. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Tim.
Really quickly before we get started, and this is not on the notes, if you don't know anything about Erica and don't want anything, the one thing you have to know about Erica and her crazy husband Joel is that they are a Jeep thing or a Jeep family, or they do Jeep off-roading. So
we are Jeepers.
Yes, is that what it's called? Jeepers.
Yeah, Jeepers.
I like that. Okay, very cool. So if you're connected with either of them on social media, you will see them mudding from time to time. So
or rock crawling.
Or rock crawling.
Mud leads to rust, so we try not to go mudding, as they say, but crawling or overlanding. Absolutely.
I've seen your Jeep covered in mud more than one post. So. I will just point that out. All right.
It does happen.
It does happen. We say that you're with Mersive. You were also previously with Atlona. You also started your own education called Lava.
Yep.
Talk for a second though, how you got involved in the industry. How did Erica Carroll find her way into AV?
Well, I sort of fell into it like everybody else. At the time, I've always been sort of entrepreneurial. So I actually had a virtual assistance and graphic design firm, and I reached out to Digital Projection for a role. I'm also Cuban, I speak Spanish, and they had an incentive trip coming up in Costa Rica a decade ago. And they needed help planning all of that, and that sat well with my virtual assistance and graphic design. And so I met with Mike Levy, and I actually met with him a couple of times. And reading through my resume, I spent a large time in high school and college at Best Buy, working all over the store as a Geek Squad agent, personal shopping assistant, not just in a particular department. People would actually schedule time to shop with me so that I could go into multiple departments. And that was the thing that caught his eye. And he's like, oh, so you understand how things work together. So I'd like to offer you a position as an applications engineer, setting up systems, troubleshooting systems, learning how everything works together. And I accepted that offer. So that's how I got into AV.
Interesting. See, that sounds like a kind of a roundabout way, though, as every other AV story does as well.
Absolutely. In a previous life, I was also a lighting and set designer for an improv theater here in Atlanta at Dad's Garage, which is an amazing theater that offered me a lot of opportunities. So I've always had that interest in technology, and I just landed on the manufacturing side earlier instead of like going into rental and staging, which I assume a lot of other people might take that path instead.
Yeah, absolutely. Rental and staging, live events, certainly, but manufacturing as well. Talk for a second then, because you coming at it from that aspect of it. As a woman in the industry and as a woman in the AV industry, and I've used the term the only, and others have as well throughout these interviews. And the only really being, and I got it from a guy by the name of David Goggins, who wrote a book called Can't Hurt Me, and you need to read it. It's fantastic. Not just you, Erica, but everybody should read it. But the idea here is that you are the only person of color. You're the only woman in a situation, and at the boardroom, and in the class. Talk for a second about some of the challenges that you faced as a woman in the AV industry, and how you've overcome them.
Sure. So starting at DPI, I was in a pretty unique situation, diving straight into technical ideas and being that frontline support when people would call in. I had to do a lot of proving myself as the only girl in the department, or when you call into the applications engineering department, you're expecting to talk to a particular type of person, and this is what you get instead. Having people say things like, "Can I talk to a guy in your department?" And I would say, I mean, you can. He's going to say the exact same thing I'm saying. Sure, why not? And everybody in that team, I will say, has been, I mean, they were amazing mentors, and they were so supportive of me, and, you know, sticking behind me, even if maybe something I was saying was incorrect, you know, giving that positive feedback first, and then saying, you know, maybe this is the only thing I would change. But having to prove myself was like the biggest thing for me, not just in the industry, but as a girl, as, you know, a Latina in the industry. And I think hand in hand with that came imposter syndrome. There's times where it's like, you know what, I'm always willing to learn and show up and be there, but then you take a step back and it's like, do I actually deserve this? You know, am I where I'm supposed to be? Do I actually fit at this table with these people? And you know, the biggest thing for me to overcome that is just getting that feedback where people are, you know, giving you that positive reinforcement. And sometimes it's not direct. There was a time when, you know, I was on your show a few years ago, and Lainey was on here, and she said, "You were the first female instructor that I ever had, and it was great." And that to me was like, oh, super validation, you know? So those are just a couple of things. It's just overcoming mental hurdles, I think, more than anything else. And having advocates. There was a time where, you know, you're in these situations, you're setting up a show, and there's like everybody's exhausted, and somebody goes, "Oh, well, you can sit in my lap," and it's like, no, that's inappropriate. And having other people stand up for you and say, "You know what, that's not okay. You can't just say things like that." Or I've been put in a position where somebody liked to like pet my hair. It was weird. But it was in a group of other people. And my boss at the time said, "You know what? You don't have to put up with that. And you're not putting up with that in front of me." So I don't know, just having advocates to stand up for you. And I think it's just this shift that's happening in the industry of things that were appropriate in the past because it was so male dominated. And I take pride in being one of the guys, but at some point you have to say, like, yeah, that's funny, but hold on a second. Let's just think about what you're saying first.
Talk for a second about you know the need to work harder, to be taken seriously, right? And this is again a common story that I've heard the last couple of months is, you know, the need to prove yourself, the need to, you know, why do you think that is, and when do you think we'll get beyond that?
Well, I think it happens because that's just sort of this in a when you're around so many men, there's this thought that the girl is usually going to say something like, "Hey, can you do this for me?" When in my own right, I need to be able to do for myself. And I don't want to have a dependency on men or feel like I'm being a squeaky wheel or dragging down the team just because I'm a woman. So I think that's always been something that I have faced personally. Again, I've always been one of the guys, so always being able to hold my own, especially in theater and technical theater, when it comes to anything that's labor related or, you know, anything like that. I don't want to be seen as the weak link. So I just think it's important to always show up and be your best self so that people can trust you and feel like you're part of that team. And I think that trust is a huge part of being in a team. I don't know that I see it going away anytime soon. I think that we still have a way to go. There's a long road ahead of us, and we're already, you know, going down that path with women's councils and showing this advocacy for women, not just in the industry, but in general in any male dominated field. I just think that the more we're aware of it, which is currently happening, the closer we'll get to feeling that equality where we actually belong on the same field. I don't know how long that'll take.
All right. One of the questions that we kind of developed with some other friends was the idea that when you face a hurdle, especially in a professional setting, you have a choice, whether it's racism or misogyny or gender bias. You can choose to face it like you did, or you can choose to say, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm going to go a different direction. Why did you choose to face it?
I think I chose to face it more than anything because I fell in love with the industry. I fell in love with the people, and I really feel like AV as an industry is just an extended family. You know, we all meet at Infocom. Everybody's wearing different colored shirts than last year. But it's a big family reunion, and the people are there. And when you meet the right people, you have those advocates, and you have, people that will stand up for you when you can't stand up for yourself. And the tech is cool. I'm like a gadgety person. So I don't know. I like technology, and I love the people in the industry.
All right, very good. Last question for you, Ms. Carroll. Take a look. You are younger than I am, so you have many years ahead of you before you retire. But when you do, look back, and what do you want to see change?
Oh, that's a great question. So my immediate thought is I'd like to see more women in the industry, more of an equal ratio. But I think that's difficult to say that it would happen where we are currently, because I think that starts way back in even like K-12, right? As girls are growing up, not just getting into computers or like STEM programs in that way. I'd like to see the industry evolve as something that becomes an option for young people to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Erica Carroll from Mersive. Thank you, ma'am. How do people connect with you or Mersive if they are so inclined?
Absolutely. So you can go to mersive.com, or you can reach me directly at ecarroll, it's 2 R's, 2 L's, at mersive.com.
All right, very good. Erica Carroll, thank you so much for your time. For us, for AVNation, go by our website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. You'll find interviews like this, as well as our 2 weekly programs. One's called AV Week. The other is Resi Week, looking at the commercial and residential side of the industry. All that and more at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.